We are good to go. All right. Um, Wonderful. So we can go ahead and get started. I want to say happy Wednesday, everyone. I don't know that this feels like Wednesday. I don't really know what day today feels like, but not really Wednesday. But
I thought
anyhow,
today was Thursday all day.
Thursday, maybe it feels like Thursdays, but it does feel like a long week. But we're going to hop on tonight. We have a special guest. Stephanie is joining us. Stephanie specializes in hormones. And I know that for a lot of us in the group, that is a really hot topic of conversation. There's a lot of interest in that, whether we are having problems with our periods or whether we are approaching menopause and dealing with the fluctuations of the hormones through perimenopause. So thought it would be fun to have someone else besides me come on and talk about this evening. So Stephanie's here to join us. Welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight, Stephanie.
Yes, of course. Thank you for having me. I love doing these things, so it's always lots of fun.
It is. Thank you for joining us.
Of course. Okay, so I'll just give you guys like a little blurb about me. I've been in the health and fitness industry now for over 11 years, which is crazy to me. I started out being like a personal trainer, then an exercise therapist. I did my bachelor's and master's in kinesiology. I worked with elite level athletes. I worked with the police and fire department. Fell in love with chronic disease. That's where like my true passion really started. Worked for the health region doing like cardiac rehab and stroke rehab and COPD, cancer, osteoarthritis, like anything at this point I pretty much worked with. I was running all the chronic disease exercise management programs for quite a while in like a health region area is what we call it up here in Canada. I'm in Saskatoon in the middle of nowhere. And then after that, I was doing my osteo school as well while I was doing that. Then I was working at a gym for a really long time, still training all throughout this, opened my own clinic, got into nutrition coaching because it's obviously, I love the human body and how everything works all together. And it was kind of the missing piece. Started working with people who were like morbidly obese and quite overweight, and realizing like people were on appetite suppressants and eating 1,200 calories a day when they were like 250, 300, 400 pounds. And they've been doing that for years and nothing had changed. So I think it's safe to say that that was not the solution. Eating too much was not the problem. So then I really delved into like hormone health and metabolism and like absolutely fell in love with it. Then I started working with perimenopausal women, and I found out that was a whole different ballgame. Women are not just little men. We have our hormone fluctuations from like our cycle, and then we get pregnant, and then the hormones that happen after you have your kids, and then going through all these stages of perimenopause and menopause. Like our bodies are inherently so different during all those stages. So it's almost naive to think that what we were doing before is going to continue to work or is going to work now. And the whole eat less, move more clearly doesn't work. Does it work when everything is good? Sure, when everything is balanced, but like if it was gonna work, it was gonna work already, and it hasn't. So therefore, there's something else going on, and typically it's your hormones. I personally work specifically with perimenopause and menopause. A lot of people with Hashimoto's and thyroid issues as well. Some PCOS in there too. But like our bread and butter, like the focus of everything that we do is around perimenopause, menopause, and onwards. The same rules apply during the entire, like the way we approach fat loss is the same for perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause, because the transition that's happening stays the same. It's just during perimenopause, you'll see huge fluctuations because your hormones are doing all kinds of stuff. So what I want to talk about first is estrogen. We all know it plays a very important role in our body, not just for reproduction, but like other bodily functions in general. It contributes not just to like reproduction, but also our cognitive health, our bone health, and our cardiovascular function. So there's a lot of things that estrogen is really important for, and we know that estrogen is going to drop when we're going through perimenopause and onwards. Just because you have estrogen dominance doesn't mean your estrogen isn't low. It means that it is high compared to other hormones, but it's still going to be lower than it was before you went through perimenopause and menopause. So estrogen is very important for promoting muscle growth. It's very important for mitochondrial function, which we'll talk about these things in a second here. It helps regulate your inflammation. It helps manage your blood sugars. It helps regulate your appetite, as well as maintain a healthy bone mass. So what happens when estrogen drops is a few really unfortunate things. Everyone always gets really depressed when I talk about this stuff. I think it's very important to understand what actually happens. So the first part is that we have a reduced ability now to maintain and build muscle mass because we don't have estrogen present. And what that means is we become in a what we call like a more catabolic environment, which means that our body naturally is going to want to get rid of muscle mass, which is not good. We want to maintain muscle mass as best as we can because that helps keep our metabolism nice and high. It keeps us nice and strong. It helps with our blood sugar regulation because it allows somewhere for those sugars to go. All in all, like having muscle mass is incredibly important because then you just burn more calories at rest. So we want to maintain the muscle mass that we have. We don't want to lose just weight where we lose fat and muscle masses and you get the skinny fat look. We want to preserve as much muscle mass as possible. And unfortunately, when estrogen decreases, this becomes more and more difficult. Then if you pair that with a low calorie diet and a low carb diet, those are both two other things that are going to create a more catabolic environment where your body wants to use muscle mass for energy. So you have less estrogen, you're eating low carb for a really long time, you're eating low calorie for a really long time, you are going to lose muscle mass, and we do not want that. Inherently, like when you are on a low carb diet, it is very short. You don't have to be in it for a very long time where you start to see a decrease in muscle mass, which is not good. So we want to eat our carbs. It's very important during perimenopause. Secondly, mitochondrial function. So that's just our ability to turn stored energy or stored fat and use it into energy and just stored fuel in general. So this is why working out fasted is actually super shitty when you're going through perimenopause and menopause. You want to have a carbohydrate snack before that is very quick digesting, easily accessed. So this is things like fruit, super awesome to have before, a rice cake, super awesome to have before. You need something in your system because it takes us so much longer to access those energy stores. So then we're not going to get as much bang for our buck in our workouts. We're not going to be able to push ourselves as hard. We're not going to be able to focus on strength and build muscle mass as well. So we really want to make sure that we are not working out in a fasted state because when estrogen drops, this is a problem. Then there's inflammation. So when we go through perimenopause and menopause, a lot of people are like, oh, I just feel fluffy all of a sudden. It's because your levels of inflammation are going to increase because estrogen helps control inflammation in your body. So then you also have progesterone, which is also going to drop, which is also an anti-inflammatory. So then you have a double whammy of an inflammatory response. So naturally, we're going to have more inflammation. So then if we're eating low carb, if we're eating low calorie, if we're go, we're stressed out, we're not sleeping, we're over exercising a ton, all of those things are going to increase inflammation even more. And you don't have the estrogen and progesterone to help bring it down. So we are far more sensitive to stressors and we are far more predisposed to have inflammation. And we know this is bad because when inflammation is high, we are at a higher risk of developing cardiovascular disease, for example, which we do not want, and a higher risk of becoming insulin resistant, when we're going to talk about next. And then that increases your diabetic risk as well. Estrogen also helps manage our blood sugars. So when estrogen decreases, we are going to see that blood sugars are more erratic. So you might start experiencing more crashes and cravings. And this is typically wise because estrogen decreases, we have a decreased insulin sensitivity. So we're going to see more spikes in sugar, quicker drops in sugar because we don't have estrogen there to help regulate that. So we'll touch on that in a bit. I'm going to give like a big old summary, but that's again going to lead to like potential increase in diabetes. That's also going to increase your cortisol response. So this is why you don't want to eat low carb because we know low carbs are going to like decrease our muscle mass, which is going to increase our insulin resistance even more. But if you are having those carbohydrates that you need to have, make sure they are higher in fiber, make sure you're pairing them with protein, and going for walks after meals can also help with this as well. Estrogen regulates our appetite. So when it drops, that gets all kinds of messed up. So you really can't trust your intuition anymore. People are like, I only eat when I'm hungry. No, you can't because your body doesn't actually regulate that well anymore. So you have to be proactive in terms of like, if you're hungry, yes, you should eat. But typically when you're not hungry, you have to be more prepared and be proactive and be like, okay, if I don't eat now, then I'm going to have like this blood sugar drop later. I think they're really going to struggle. Then I'm going to be craving other things, make poor choices. So you have to be a little bit more proactive and think about eating more like mindfully as opposed to intuitively, because technically your intuition is messed up now because your estrogen is dropped. And then you also have a reduced ability to absorb calcium into your bones. So bone density decreases. So during perimenopause and menopause, we also see an increase in the incidence of osteoporosis. So people are like, oh yeah, I'm just going to hammer some more calcium. No, the issue with estrogen is that when it drops, you can't absorb calcium. So you can consume all the calcium you want. If you aren't able to absorb it, it doesn't matter. So taking vitamin D and vitamin B complex can actually help with this a little bit as well. But doing like your exercise is going to be the most bang for your buck here. That's going to help stimulate bone growth and increase absorption of calcium into the bones. So it's not just chugging milk to help you with this instance here. There are lots of signs of low estrogen and high estrogen, and they're very, very similar. So you can't always like count on just symptoms to help you figure out what's going on. So for example, low estrogen is going to be like dry skin, weak and brittle bones, trouble concentrating, irritability and mood swings, tender breasts, vaginal dryness, hot flashes, night sweats, irregular periods or no periods, weight gain, especially in the belly and hips, headaches, decreased sex drive, fatigue and trouble sleeping, insulin resistance, sugar cravings. Symptoms of high estrogen are very similar: sugar cravings, belly fat accumulation, bloating, tenderness and swelling in the breast, decreased sex drive, irregular periods, increased symptoms of PMS, headaches, moodiness, weight gain, sleepiness, fatigue, memory problems, anxiety, night sweats. And your guys are like, those two lists sound exactly the same. Yes, they are very similar. And most of you are probably like, I have a lot of those things. Yes, you probably do. So we need to make sure that we're doing what we can to help control our cortisol, which is going to help control all those symptoms, and our estrogen. So yes, you can take hormone replacement therapy to help with your symptoms, but it's not actually addressing the root cause. So for example, we have like a hierarchy of our hormones. We have cortisol, which literally is like the puppeteer master. It controls everything. Then you have insulin above that, which controls everything below. And then you have your testosterone, your estrogen, your progesterone, all that kind of stuff. So yes, you can take those things to fix the stuff at the bottom, but you're basically just plugging holes. If you don't address the things above, you're just gonna have to keep upping your doses, playing around with medication. It's not actually gonna solve the problem. So we have to address cortisol, because what happens is cortisol can make estrogen low. It can make progesterone low, which will lead to estrogen dominance. Cortisol will also cause an increase in your insulin resistance. I'm not even going to touch on that because it's like a whole other talk and thing that I can get into. But like cortisol is going to negatively affect all those things. And the things that increase our cortisol are low carb diets, eating low calorie for too long, high intensity exercise, like your HIIT training and lots of cardio. If you're not sleeping well, if you are very stressed out, if you're very go, you're rushing around all the time, chasing kids out the door and like having to drop them off at places and trying to like do your meal prep, like you're just constantly on the go all the time. Like all of those things are going to increase your cortisol levels. And yes, even exercise is going to do that. So, and our body cannot differentiate between good stress, bad stress. It just completely acknowledges it as all the same, and you're going to get the exact same response. So the main thing that you want to do to help with your estrogen, with your weight loss, anything that helps improve your cortisol levels is going to help improve your metabolism and your hormonal balance. So why is this so important? Like I hammer home cortisol so hard is because when your progesterone and your estrogen drop, what happens is we don't have a buffer now to deal with stress anymore. Because that's really something that helps keep like our inflammation down and our insulin resistance down, and our body can really tolerate a lot. As you go through perimenopause and menopause, you might find like little things that like didn't really bother you before really fucking piss you off. You might find that like all of a sudden now weight gain comes on really quickly. You see like a lot more fluid retention, you feel fluffier, all those symptoms that we talked about. That happens because we cannot tolerate stress. So we can't be as aggressive with our fat loss phases. We can't do all these crazy things that we used to do and over restrict because our body just cannot handle it anymore. And it ends up being too much stress. So things that you can do to help you with your cortisol response. There's a lot of really easy things. So one is getting sunshine in the morning. We want cortisol to be higher in the morning, lower in the evening. So getting sunshine in your eyes is very helpful in the morning. Sleep, focusing on improving your sleep quality. This is really important. Going from 6 hours to 7 to 8 hours makes a huge difference on hormone balance and on your cortisol levels. And getting to sleep before, like the hours you sleep before midnight count more than the hours you get afterwards. So in terms of like how your circadian rhythm and your hormones and all that stuff works. So trying to go to sleep earlier is really important, but then you're like, okay, that's shitty advice and I just lay there and I'm not tired. Things that you can do to help you fall asleep are to make sure the room is cold, to make sure there's no lights, make sure it's really dark, having some brown or white noise playing, have a fan going, having a pre-bedtime snack. Yes, having a bedtime snack is not going to make you fat. In fact, it's going to help you sleep better. So having a snack that has some slow digesting carb, whether that be some oatmeal, it could be a piece of toast that's higher in fiber, have some peanut butter on it, like pair that carb with a fat or a protein to slow down digestion. That's going to help keep you asleep, help you fall asleep. It's going to bring those cortisol levels down, your sleepy hormone up. It's going to stabilize blood sugars for the night so that you're not waking up due to cortisol spikes and blood sugar drops. And then that's all going to have a positive influence on your hormonal levels and your metabolism in the long run. It's also really important because that's when our growth hormone increases, which, as we talked about before, we have a really hard time putting on muscle mass during estrogen or when estrogen drops. So getting this sleep is very important to allow for your muscles to actually recover and build up those muscle fibers again. Otherwise, again, we're just constantly breaking it down, and we have a reduced ability to put on and maintain muscle mass. And then if you're lacking sleep, that's going to make that even worse. Other things is to like focus on strength training. Take 2 to 3 minute breaks in between each exercise. This is something that so many people have a hard time with, where you're just sitting and like, you're like, oh my God, like I have things to do. I can't sit here for this long. Like sit for 2 to 3 minutes. That's really going to help bring those cortisol levels down as well. And again, positively impact your hormonal balance, as well as building that muscle mass that is now so hard to put on. Avoiding stimulants after 2 p.m. So anything with caffeine is going to help increase your cortisol levels, which we do not want. And this includes like caffeine that's found in like sodas. This is going to include caffeine in like chocolate. That's why having chocolate before bed usually doesn't work well. I like to just test this theory every now and then, and it always proves me correct. I always wake up at like 2 a.m. because my blood sugar drops and the caffeine totally messed with me. The other thing is to make sure that you are not, that you're having like a nice, healthy, balanced diet, because again, anything that's going to increase your inflammation is going to increase your cortisol levels, which is then going to have a negative impact on everything below. So those are like the big things to really focus on to help deal with your cortisol levels. Do anything that helps relax you. We're constantly in fight or flight. So going for like a nice leisurely walk, spending some time painting or coloring or reading or listening to an audiobook or whatever it is, even if it's just for 10 minutes, it will do wonders for your body to get you out of that fight or flight response and bring those cortisol levels down so that your estrogen can like get to where it needs to be. It's never going to be as high as it was pre-menopause, but trying to promote that balance and really make sure that we're mitigating those stressors as best as we can is going to be like the key to your success when it comes to like trying to lose weight and deal with your hormones during that super challenging time, because perimenopause tends to be really stressful because we're already dealing with like, we're taking care of parents. We are becoming empty nesters. We start losing people in our lives. There's usually job changes, like a change in identity as well. Like there's just so many things that happen in that time in our lives that's very stressful. So we want to make sure that, again, that we're doing everything that we can to really mitigate that response, mitigate that cortisol response, so that your hormones can be healthy, happy, and you can actually get to where you need to be. Sorry, that was a lot.
But thank you. It was really good. A lot of the things that you talked about and touched on tonight are things that we have talked about, like how important it is to please stop working out fasted and please have a snack before you go to bed. Stop cutting the food off at 5 or 6 o'clock, because it makes an incredible difference on those cortisol levels.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And like the big thing is just like how much it impacts your estrogen levels. Like we need to try and keep those weird, like balanced and like as good as we can, because we cannot tolerate stressors when our estrogen drops. Like this is so huge. So like just adding more and more and more and more is not going to give you a different result. In fact, it's going to make things worse. You're going to see that accumulation in belly fat. You're going to see that inflammation. You're going to see that decrease in fat or in muscle mass. You are going to see an increase in like blood sugar dysregulation, and all those things are what leads to chronic conditions, more adipose tissue, more cardiovascular disease, more diabetes. And those are things that we really want to mitigate as much as we can.
For sure. And then too, when we're going through that high unmanaged stress, it also is going to be have a negative impact on the gut function too, which then it is it's a whole another ballgame that
Oh
we
yeah,
have to do.
absolutely. Yeah, leads to like leaky gut, lots of inflammation. It's like, it's so, it's not a good time. It's
No,
not a good time. Tossing some alcohol in there, and then like you've got like quite the shitstorm.
your stress is not at this level.
Exactly.
Yeah. We've got a few on Facebook for sure. If anybody on Facebook has questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat, and we'll get those answered for you tonight. Going back to the training, I had a question. So the women that are going through perimenopause that are trying to lose weight generally are doing a lot of cardio, and cardio is another stress. And I know the HIIT training is a stress in itself. So what type of cardiovascular exercise does that leave them?
So you can do it if you enjoy it. It's just needing to be aware that that's not going to get you to your fat loss goals. Like if the only reason that you're doing cardio is to lose fat, that's not great. I personally just focus on people increasing their steps, like biking leisurely, like nothing crazy. Because honestly, most people do not enjoy cardio. Let's be honest. And the only reason people do cardio is because they think it's going to make them skinny. And when I tell them that it doesn't, they're like, "Oh my God, I love you so much."
Right. Yeah, no, it really doesn't. It's a big stress. And I can see like increasing steps, making sure that you're mindfully being active that way is super
Mhm.
helpful. So we generally encourage people to just go outside and take a walk, because then you're getting, you're getting double, you're getting your steps in, and you're getting that sunlight exposure. Or hiking is good too. We have a lot of people that hike.
Exactly.
Somebody has a question. Um,
Mhm.
what foods are helpful to balance estrogen?
So fiber is really helpful for sure. So, and it depends on like obviously a healthy balanced diet is always going to be what you want. But if you have high estrogen levels, so estrogen dominance, typically this is because you are dealing with poor liver function. Like the detoxification process isn't working as well. So things like fiber is really helpful. Making sure that you're limiting alcohol intake, super important. And actually alcohol will convert testosterone to estrogen. So if you're someone who's also worried about like high estrogen levels for like cancer risk, that's something else you have to think about. But typically anything that's going to help like liver function and just like general good healthy eating. So fiber is super, super important. I cannot stress that enough. And then like high nutrient dense foods. So like your fruits, your veggies. This doesn't mean that you can't have other things. Like I eat pasta and bread regularly in my diet, as do all of my clients. But like the fiber is like one of the biggest things I like to hit on, because that's going to be really huge. And then like healthy fats. So making sure we're not pumping ourselves full of omega-6s. We don't want to have those inflammatory fats that can be really hard on our liver and just our body in general as well. So supplementing with omega-3s can be helpful too, and utilizing like avocados and fatty fish, flax seeds. Like you want to have those nice, good, healthy fats, as opposed to all the processed stuff that we typically have in our diet right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think most of the people in our group are vegan, so fiber is generally pretty good in their diets. I mean, we normally when they come in, we see like levels about 40 or so, so that's pretty good. She said she had another question. What about for people with low estrogen?
So low estrogen, same thing. You want to make sure that you're eating like a nice, healthy, balanced diet. The biggest thing when estrogen is low is typically because of high cortisol levels. So making sure that you're eating enough and making sure you're having enough carbohydrate. Those are two like very important things, because those are going to make the biggest impact on your cortisol levels than anything else.
Gotcha. What is your view on, so carbohydrates are going to help lower cortisol levels because they're soothing on the nervous system. So what about having carbohydrates in the morning when we're trying to get that sunlight?
So you still want to have carbohydrates in the morning for different reasons. So like, yes, you want cortisol to be higher in the morning, but you do want to help start bringing it down. You don't want to keep it elevated all day, right? So that's going to help like start bringing the curve down. But having carbohydrates in the morning is super important just for setting you up for success for the day in terms of like providing energy, providing fiber to keep you full. to keep you regular. Like having food in the morning is very, very important. We recommend everybody have carbohydrates at every single meal, starchy carbs. So breakfast, usually we say like half carb, half protein, and then lunch and supper is at least a quarter of your plate is going to be your starchy carbs.
Okay, no, that makes perfect sense. Thanks for clarification on that one.
Yeah,
She says, thank you so much for answering.
of course.
Awesome. Yeah, we don't have anything else at the moment. I know I have certainly enjoyed the conversation tonight. I shared an awful lot of information, and you broke it down really, I think really super easy to understand as well too. So this will be
Good. I know I talk really fast a lot because I get excited about this stuff, but I try really hard to like summarize stuff at the end and like make sense of it all as to like why it matters, if that kind of makes sense.
Right. No, I think you did a fantastic job. So this will be just a nice piece of information that can now live in our Facebook group for people to reference. I appreciate it.
Perfect. Of course.
Well, it doesn't look like we have any more questions on Facebook, so I can go ahead and release you for the rest of the evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Stephanie. I really appreciate you taking the time to come in and share your knowledge on hormones with us.
Of course. Awesome. Anytime. Have a great night.
You too. Thank you so much.
Bye.